Every weekend, there's a young guy in a suburban neighborhood who wakes up at 6 in the morning, not to go to work or hit the gym, but to spend hours in his garage with a car that already runs perfectly fine. He's installing parts that cost more than some people's monthly rent. His friends think he's obsessed. His family thinks he's wasting money. But to him, every modification is necessary. Every upgrade is essential. This isn't just about cars. This is about something much deeper in the human psyche. The relationship between a person and their modified car operates on psychological levels that most people never consider. When someone decides to lower their suspension, change their exhaust, or reprogram their engine, they're not just altering metal and machinery. They're engaging in a form of self-expression that reveals fundamental aspects of human nature. Consider this. A car is one of the few possessions that people actually inhabit. It's not just owned, it's experienced. It's a space where people spend hours every single day, sometimes more time than in their own bedrooms. So when someone modifies their car, they're essentially redesigning a space they occupy, much like decorating a home or choosing what clothes to wear. The difference is that this space moves through the world, broadcasting identity to everyone who sees it. Research in consumer psychology shows that people form emotional attachments to objects that reflect their ideal self. The car becomes a physical manifestation of who they want to be, not necessarily who they are. A 23-year-old working an entry-level job might drive a modified Honda Civic with a turbocharger and racing seats. The car doesn't match his current reality, but it matches his aspirations. It represents speed, performance, capability, and a future where he has achieved more. There's a guy named Marcus from Toronto who started modifying cars at 19. He worked 2 jobs to afford parts for his Subaru WRX. When asked why he spent money he barely had on modifications, he said something revealing. He mentioned that growing up, his family moved constantly because of his father's job. They lived in 7 different cities before he turned 18. He never had a stable friend group, never had a room that felt truly his. But the car became the one constant he could control. Every modification was a decision he made, a mark he left, a piece of stability in an unstable life. This reveals a crucial psychological driver, the need for control. In a world where so much feels uncertain and beyond individual influence, a car represents a domain of complete autonomy. The owner decides everything: what color it should be, how it should sound, how it should perform. No one can tell them otherwise. It's a small kingdom where they're the absolute authority. The modification community also fulfills a deep human need for belonging. Walk into any car meet on a Saturday night and the psychology becomes immediately apparent. These aren't just people showing off vehicles. They're people who have found their tribe. Someone who spends $30,000 modifying a Nissan 350Z might seem irrational to outsiders, but within the community, that person is respected, admired, understood. They speak a shared language of horsepower, torque, suspension geometry, and aesthetic choices. Psychologist Abraham Maslow identified belonging as one of the fundamental human needs, sitting right above safety and physiological needs in his famous hierarchy. For many car enthusiasts, especially younger people still figuring out their place in the world, the modification community provides exactly this. It's a space where passion is shared, where knowledge is valued, where friendships form around common interests. There's also a creative element that gets overlooked. Car modification is fundamentally an art form. The person choosing parts, colors, and modifications is making aesthetic and functional decisions similar to any artist. They're taking something mass-produced and making it unique. They're expressing a vision that exists in their mind and bringing it into physical reality. The satisfaction of seeing that vision completed activates the same reward centers in the brain that any creative accomplishment triggers. Neuroscience research shows that when people complete a project they've invested time and effort into, their brains release dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. For someone who just finished installing a new exhaust system or completed a full paint job, that dopamine hit is real and powerful. It's the same neurological response a painter gets finishing a canvas or a writer completing a novel. But there's a darker psychological side worth examining. Some people modify cars as a form of compensation. Not every modification comes from a healthy place of self-expression. Sometimes it's rooted in insecurity, in a need to prove something to others or to oneself. The psychology term is compensatory consumption. It's when people buy or modify things to make up for perceived inadequacies in other areas of their lives. A researcher at a British university conducted interviews with modified car owners and found a notable percentage mentioned feeling overlooked or underestimated in their professional or personal lives. The loud exhaust, the aggressive body kit, the lowered stance, these modifications became ways of demanding attention and respect that they felt they weren't receiving elsewhere. The car became a tool for validation. This doesn't mean all car modification stems from insecurity. That would be reductive and inaccurate. But it's important to acknowledge that psychological motivations exist on a spectrum. Some modifications come purely from passion and creativity. Others come from deeper emotional needs that the person might not even consciously recognize. There's also the element of mastery. Humans are wired to seek competence and skill development. Many people who modify cars don't just buy parts and pay someone to install them. They learn to do the work themselves. They spend hours watching tutorials, reading forums, making mistakes, and gradually building expertise. This journey from novice to skilled modifier provides profound psychological satisfaction. The concept of flow state, identified by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, describes the mental state where a person is fully immersed in an activity, losing track of time, and experiencing deep focus. Many car enthusiasts describe exactly this state when working on their vehicles. The challenges are neither too easy nor impossibly hard. They're in that sweet spot where skill meets challenge, and the result is pure engagement. Consider a father and son in Melbourne who spent 2 years restoring and modifying a 1990s Toyota Supra together. The father mentioned that those hours in the garage became the deepest conversations they ever had. While bleeding brakes or adjusting suspension, they talked about life, relationships, fears, and dreams. The car became a medium for connection, a shared project that facilitated emotional bonding that might not have happened otherwise. This social dimension extends beyond individual relationships. Modified car culture creates events, gatherings, and shared experiences. Car meets aren't just about displaying vehicles, they're about community rituals. People drive sometimes hours to attend. They park in carefully organized rows. They walk around admiring each other's work, offering compliments, asking technical questions. These gatherings fulfill social needs that modern life often leaves unmet. In an era where many people interact primarily through screens, where community institutions have weakened, where traditional social structures have fragmented, car culture provides something tangible and real. It gets people out of their houses, into physical spaces, engaging face-to-face. The psychology of this cannot be overstated. Humans evolved in tight-knit communities, and when modern life fails to provide that, people seek it elsewhere. There's also the rebellion embedded in modification culture. Every society has rules, expectations, and norms. Modified cars often deliberately violate automotive norms. They're louder than necessary, lower than practical, more aggressive than socially acceptable. This isn't accidental. It's a form of nonviolent rebellion, a way of saying that the owner doesn't fully accept conventional expectations. Psychologically, this rebellion serves a developmental purpose, especially for younger enthusiasts. It's a way of establishing independence and individual identity separate from family, society, or authority. It's relatively safe rebellion. Nobody gets hurt, no laws are seriously broken, but it still provides that psychological satisfaction of asserting autonomy. The investment aspect also reveals interesting psychology. People will spend money they don't really have on modifications they don't really need. From a purely rational perspective, this makes no sense. But humans aren't purely rational. We're emotional beings who make decisions based on how things make us feel, not just logical cost-benefit analysis. That new turbocharger might be financially irresponsible, but the feeling it provides, the pride, the satisfaction, the identity reinforcement is worth more than the money spent. Understanding the psychology of people who modify cars ultimately reveals something about all human behavior. We all seek self-expression. We all need community. We all want control over some aspect of our lives. We all desire mastery and competence. The car enthusiast isn't fundamentally different from anyone else. They've just found their particular avenue for meeting these universal human needs. For some people, it's art. For others, it's music. For others, it's sports. For car enthusiasts, it's their vehicle.
The next time someone sees a heavily modified car and thinks it's excessive or pointless, remember there's a human behind those modifications with psychological needs being met, with a story being told, with an identity being expressed. That car isn't just transportation, it's therapy, creativity, community, and identity all wrapped into one powerful package.